The action of the film, based on real events, begins in 1981 in Reno, Nevada. The protagonist, Kenny Wells, shows his friend Kay the office of the geological and exploration company Washa Mining, owned by his father. The girl is not impressive by the ordinary appearance of the office. She represented mining romance differently. Kenny explains that they are not engaged in direct prey, but by the study of land for minerals. At this time, his father calls him and instructs to go to the development of a promising mine. A Sunside voice reports that this meeting was the last, since soon the old man dies. The event is transferred 7 years in advance. The bald and the lustful Kenny enters the bar where his employees work. The company's affairs are not going well, and he has to call potential investors. Kane reminds Kenny of a business meeting which is unsuccessful. Investors refuse to invest. The family business is on the verge of bankruptcy, and Kenny is not nowhere to live. He lives with a friend. Gradually, he begins to sleep. One evening, he dreams of Indonesia, where he had visited earlier. There, the geologist Michael Acosta opened the largest copper deposit in Southeast Asia. Now, Acosta is obsessed with the idea of finding a ring of fire. Deposits of gold in the development of which Kenny wants to participate. Having found a geologist's business card, Kenny goes on a business trip the next morning, laying the remaining jewelry in a pawn shop. Men are found in the lobby of the hotel, and Michael is slightly embarrassed by Kenny's shaking look. But his deeds also go no matter. Enthusiasm is exhausted, and he is faced with failures. However, Kenny's incendiary speech, eager to return to success, convinces Michael to engage in a new development. They go up the river to the site on the island of Kalimantan. Michael is sure that there is gold here and it only needs to be found. Kenny, not accustomed to such travels, admires untouched landscapes. Having reached the village, they discuss the development plan, and Kenny immediately writes a contract on a piece of fabric that Michael signs. Having strengthened the contract with a strong handshake, Kenny returns to America to look for investments. Employees of the company call small investors to collect the necessary amount for permission and the purchase of equipment. Despite the sincere faith in success, Kenny fails to collect the right amount, and Michael has to be content with what is. Soon, they return to the site with workers, organize a camp, and proceed to excavations. The first soil samples are sent to the laboratory. Waiting for the results in the jungle, Michael and Kenny are talking, exchanging life observations. However, the results of the analysis are not pleased. Each new sample reduces the chances of gold. The situation becomes critical due to a lack of funding. Even local workers begin to leave excavations despite Kenny's pleas. In addition, his health is undermined by malaria. While Kenny is lying with the disease, Michael is trying to persuade the locals to return to work. In exchange for equipment to clean water, they agree. Kenny gives the last $2,000 for filters, after which Michael bypasses local houses to persuade people to work for technical innovations. When Kenny, having heard about the notorious bastard, finally comes to his senses, the work in the mine actively continues. The geologist reports that good news appeared in laboratory reports. Gold, bearing residential content, is 1/8 ounces per ton of ore. Michael returns to his homeland to celebrate success and continue to work the company. Inspired by successes, Kenny plans to where to buy land and build a house for himself and Kay. Against the backdrop of the growth in the value of shares, the journalist from the Specialized magazine who is interested in developments in Indonesia takes an interview. Soon, investors who had previously refused to cooperate. He does not miss the opportunity to humiliate one of the assistants of the boss, who rudely treated him. But in the end, he chooses him with his manager for directness and business grip. The company's affairs go uphill. Promotions are growing, and Kenny can afford to move from bar to a spacious office. Interest in the company is shown by businessmen with Wall Street. At the negotiations, bankers offer strategic cooperation, but Kenny does not want to share power. He wants only investments. Then, Michael offers bankers to go to the jungle with them to see what is happening in place. Suddenly, the story is transferred to the future, where Kenny is interrogated by the FBI agents, led by Paul Jennings, who has not become a successful rock and roller. The floor is very interested in who exactly offered Kenny a trip to Indonesia. Further, the plot returns to the past. Kenny leads bankers at Jakarta Airport to the Acosta awaiting them. They come to a gold mining camp where partners show how the process is organized. One of the guests finds a large nugget, which decides the issue of cooperation with the stock exchange. Kenny moves to New York with his friend Kay. On September 8th, they open the sale of shares of the company. On the first day, the price of shares jumps up to $70 apiece, which makes launch the most successful one year. Gradually, Kenny gets used to a luxurious life and devotes less time to management of the company, preferring parties with investors and financial gates. Meanwhile, Kay accidentally eavesdropping on the conversation of bankers who plan to remove Kenny from business. She tries to warn him, but shes him for flirting with another girl. Instead of a serious conversation about affairs between them, after which Kay leaves leaves, warning him about the conspiracy of the bankers. Left alone, Kenny enjoys the life of a rich man. At one of the parties, he meets Mark Hancock, who controlled most of the gold mining before Kenny began his business. Hancock wants to redeem most of the gold core, but this will lead to the absorption of Kenny's company and the removal of his name from the name. Emotionally abandoning a generous sentence, Kenny soon faces serious problems. Soldiers arrive at the mine, and Indonesia authorities nationalize the enterprise. Michael Acosta is removed from business, and workers are expelled. The geologist informs Kenny by phone about the events, assuming that this is due to the results of yesterday's business meeting. During the interrogation, Kenny says that Hancock and his company have influential friends, including the former U.S. president. With such connections, it is easy to negotiate with Sukarno, the president of Indonesia, who is friends with the head of the world seedling of democracy. However, the capitalism that they are engaged in is not subject to democratic rules. Kenny claims that his gold mine was simply stolen, after which the company's shares are sharply falling in price. That same evening, having drunk, Kenny calls Kay to make peace, but she does not answer, listening to his message on the answering machine. In the morning, it is found by Michael Acosta, and a fight is tied between them. After Kenny comes to his senses, they talk. The geologist admits that he is not a genius, but found copper by accident, stuck with a detachment in the jungle during the rain season. Men settled and decide what to do next. They return to Indonesia with the idea of taking Suharto to the partners to put pressure on the president and convince him to change the decision. They manage to find a common language with a spoiled young man. But to conclude a transaction, you need to impress. Kenny enters the cage with the manual tiger of the Indonesian major and strokes the predator. As a result, he concludes a deal with Indonesia authorities to develop cores. Bankers with Wall Street are not happy with this news, unlike Kenny. However, he is informed that the National Association of Geologists is going to award it as a golden pickle as a better gold minister. To the joy of Kenny, he goes to put up with Kay to her new job, but sees how she flirts with another man. Not wanting to show, he turns around and leaves, leaving gifts on the threshold of her house. At the award ceremony, there is Michael Acosta, who even helps Kenny to tie a bow tie. However, at the moment when Kenny stands on stage with the reward and reads a Thanksgiving speech, the geologist gets up and leaves the hall. In the morning after a stormy celebration, Kenny receives a phone call and urgently travels to the company's office, where he is met by an angry crowd. He does not understand what caused their dissatisfaction and goes to the office to figure it out. On the way, one of the men hits him. In a safe office, a businessman reports that an independent examination established the lack of gold at the Indonesian mine. It turns out that Acosta falsified the results of the tests, exchanging river gold among local residents and mixing it into soil samples for examination. The whole success of the company is a grandiose scam of one person. Kenny reports that Acosta sold the shares of the company and withdrew money to offshore accounts. The hero goes to his hotel room, for which he has nothing to pay. There, the FBI agents are already waiting for him. An interrogation begins, which is the main event of the film. At the end of the story of Kenny, Agent Jennings suggests that they are unlikely to ever see Michael Acosta. Too many influential people are angry with him for deception. According to the agent, the Indonesian military was arrested in Michakar, Jakarta, and then they were thrown off the helicopter at an altitude of 300 meters above the jungle, politely asking him to go out. Kenny does not believe in the reliability of this version. For stolen money, Michael could simulate his death. The military found below the body in similar clothes, but the face and hands were gnawed by wild animals. Data on the autopsy of Indonesian doctors are classified, and the remains are cremated to avoid unnecessary rumors. However, one nuance does not allow Kenny to calmly accept this version. The son of President Sukarno managed to sell almost all the shares of the company before the autopsy of deception, which significantly increased the capital of his family. As a result, Michael Acosta is allegedly buried, and $164 million earned by him on the scam have not yet been found. The question is now whether Kenny Wells participated in this fraud. Of course, he denies his participation and still does not believe that a friend betrayed him. Kenny lost everything. After interrogation, the FBI releases him, asking not to leave the state in the near future. Having taken his belongings from the office, Kenny goes to Kay's house. He approaches the door with a white rose in his hand. The girl, seeing him, freezes in place. She lets Kenny into the house with a slight smile and offers coffee. While he drinks, Kay gives him a mail that came to his name. Among the letters, one attracts Kenny's attention. In the envelope lies the same contract that they signed with Michael Acosta in the jungle on a piece of fabric, and a check of $82 million is attached to it, exactly half of the amount earned as a result of the scam. I also advise you to watch other videos on my channel. Good luck!